pretty frequently. And then I would also say, I know that we've been getting the updates, board members have been getting the updates. But those sort of came out since we didn't have a September meeting, we didn't have a chance to say that these were going to be coming out. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the plan with those updates as well, Kirsten.
Absolutely. So I'm not sure. I'm assuming this is kind of just the director's report, correct? Like, okay. Or was there something specific that Eric was going to share?
We were going to have that. Do you have at all that PowerPoint that walks through what those plans were? Because that was what we were hoping Eric would share with the board.
He did not like the thing that's kind of been on our website that we've been sharing. I mean,
is that the one that you gave to the executive team members?
Sorry, there have been so many communications. It's hard for me to, I'm going to pull it up and you can tell me if this is what we're talking about. Apologies. I did not know that there was something that specific, to share.
He was also going to come and just talk about where things were and what was going on. And
well, I think I can cover that. I just want to make sure that I'm.
So you can just do your director's report.
Yeah, I'll do. Yeah, I'll do that while we. Yeah, no problem. Well, and I know that obviously Margaret's presentation is going to be helpful too. So, so in terms of an update, things are moving fast and furiously, and I know that since this group didn't have an October meeting, it feels like there's been a gap in communication. But so to reference what Adrian was talking about, you know, some of the feedback obviously that we received was, you know, everybody needs to know what's going on. There's, you know, it feels like we're in rapid waters, which we are. I'm calling them class 4 rapids. And so we're working through those things and making quite a bit of headway. So one of the things that we developed was a communication piece that's a weekly update that kind of touches on 4 categories of things. So operational items, hi Margaret, operational items and training and you know, staffing levels, communications, and then what is the 4th? And I'm gonna forget. Oh, I think policy and planning. So those are kind of the 4 tracks. And so there's lots going on in operational. That tends to be a pretty heavy list if you've had a chance to look at that. But that's really our opportunity to accomplish 2 things. One is to keep our stakeholders and our community partners up to date with what's happening. And then secondly, I think to answer questions, you know, kind of make sure that hopefully a lot of times the questions that folks are having are being answered in that list of information. And if it's not, then you can reach out. So it kind of helps us, you know, maintain, or I should say, you know, keep the flow of communication efficient for the number of staff that we have. So that's part of the challenge, is just, you know, answering emails and you know, and phone calls and whatever that may be from different inquiries, which we're happy to do. It just is time consuming if we're not kind of doing more of a mass communication situation. So currently right now, it is all hands on deck for the COC's NOFO application. And we had a milestone that we had to meet on Monday in order to have the rankings done and posted online. And today it's been all about, and I know this isn't always necessarily directly related to CHHS, but just so you kind of know what the team is working on. Today was all about how we can actually access our eSNAPS account, since every name we had on the account is no longer here. So that was fun and challenging. And if any of you have worked with huge government agencies like HUD, you know that finding an actual person to speak to is challenging, but we did it. So you know, there were cartwheels happening in my little area behind here today. So that's happening. That's honestly kind of the major you know, focus this year. Oh, the other or this week, the other there's a Department of Commerce report that has to go out that Marlene Feist, one of our strike team folks, is working closely with Skylar, our accounting team for grants and grants management, to do an annual report that we have to send back to Commerce. So we've been reaching out to our partners for that, and those are starting to trickle in, and that is due on Tuesday. Oh, for those of you who may not be aware, and this may all kind of be, you're kind of getting a sneak peek at what tomorrow's update's going to be just by the timing of this meeting. But there was an isolation unit that Health District had set up with Union Gospel Mission site. What was it called? The Family Impact Center, or is that what it's called? Okay, out on East Sprague, but that contract was only good through October 31st. But they were able to partner with the Salvation Army to utilize one of their facilities that is kind of like I want to say sort of a group living, but it has, I believe, 6 different separate rooms that can hold up to 4 people per room, you know, so if we can pair people up because they're same household or whatever that may be, that started its operations on Monday the 1st. So we were able to accomplish that, or I should say they were able to accomplish that. Hi, Catherine. In with no gap in service, which was pretty phenomenal, and everybody was relieved and excited at the same time. Let's see. Oh, youth housing or youth homelessness. These acronyms are going to kill me, I swear. Youth homelessness demonstration program. Probably, or maybe since the last time we all chatted, that grant was awarded. Work is starting on that. We have brought back on a temporary project employee basis Matt Davis, who was significantly involved in putting that application together and submitting it with a couple other community partners, or, you know, subject matter experts. Cecily Ferguson, who was our Anchor Community Initiative coordinator for the city of Spokane. She's left her position, as still doing the similar body of work with Away Home Washington. Julius Henriksen, keep track here because there's a lot of moving parts. Julius Henriksen from VOA, from Crosswalk, who was also very involved in that application process, has taken Cecily's position for Anchor Community Initiative work. So we're feeling pretty good that that work is being done. It comes with a significant amount of technical assistance. And this first part of the grant is really about it's planning for the plan, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the next step. There's a plan that we need to submit. I want to say it's next week, or it seems like everything is due November 15th, 16th, or 18th. But so that's coming up too. So they're working on that. In terms of staffing, we have a clerk 3 on board. I don't know if Kim is on this call. Kim Clifton is joining us from the clerk's office as our clerk 3 to
I'm here.
Oh, hi Kim.
Hi.
To take over the clerk 3 duties. Kelly Burnett moved over to our grants and compliance side of the house. She's helping train Kim because she did a lot of that work, but Kim just started on Monday, right? And so she's getting up to speed, but at least we don't have to like explain to her where to park and where the bathrooms are and that basic stuff, because she's been with the city for a few years. So she's on board. On November 15th, we have a program professional starting. On November 16th, we have another program professional starting. And then November 29th, we have a third program professional starting. So, so we're making quite a bit of headway there. Chris Becker and I on the strike team are working together to create some onboarding, just, you know, outline and activities to bring those folks on board. So fully expect that they will all be attending, you know, some of these meetings. We may plug them into, you know, your committee meetings and asking when they are, just so that they can get a good grasp on the information that we're working with.
Kristen, real quick,
Yeah.
because you mentioned strike team, and that this is part of what we wanted Eric to talk about. That term might not be clear to board members, so if you could explain what that is.
I will back up. So I don't even remember when it was. It was probably in September, I'm gonna guess. It, you know, became very apparent that I was not going to handle this alone. And so basically we kind of came together, and the mayor appointed Eric Finch, who is our director of IT for innovation and technology for the city. And Chris Becker, who is our, at the time, she was our interim community and economic development director. And then Marlene Feist, who is our public works director, and myself to head up, you know, making sure that this team gets, and this department gets all the resources that it needs and helps us through these challenging times. So so we're resourcing. Chris has really been leading the you know, the hiring process, and we've been doing all sorts of interviews and things like that. Just getting people, you know, set up with computers and all of those logistics. Marlene has been taking on a lot of just, she has a great level of kind of institutional knowledge about the city, and then has kind of been through every single complication that the city's ever experienced. I think it's always I don't know if it's more than 10 years ago, ask Marlene, she knows everything. So, and she just has a great insight of, you know, just judgment and how we communicate and how we organize and all those things. So she's been fabulous, and she's a phenomenal communicator as a former communications manager and director. And then, so kind of the thought behind that is, we kind of all came together because of COVID response. So kind of that, you know, so that's kind of why it got named. And Eric is military background. So he kind of named it the strike team because we couldn't come up with anything better or different. So we meet on a daily basis. We have a standing meeting at 8 o'clock every morning where we just kind of keep up with everything that's happening and trying to triage as much as we can. And that's been working pretty well. So, and if I'll find after maybe, Margaret's presentation or something, I'll try to find that document that I know I'm thinking of, that I think you're referring to. So that, oh, I think it's here. Let me see if, well, some of this is going to be a little bit outdated, but that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Am I taking too long? Okay. Okay. So this was a little bit more of what I was talking, I think maybe what kind of the 4 tracks. So we had, and again, this is a little outdated, but we have these operational goals that, you know, this is the stuff that just has to get done, that, you know, the task, right? And then in here we have the training and team building. And, you know, really the focus has been on, you know, making sure that we're getting folks on board that can take on some of, to help this work get done. And then policy and planning, that's a little bit farther down the road because, you know, right now we're just trying to manage the things that need to get done. But we also very much understand that this needs to be part of the mix. And I know we've had this discussion in this group, but you know, kind of that, what is that relationship between council, COC, CHHS, the regional governance? I mean, that conversation needs to happen. And I think that's that's getting very close to that being scheduled as well. And then also, you know, I think anytime any one of us or any organization, any family, anything goes through crisis, it's an opportunity to kind of break down everything and rebuild, and that's what we're doing. And so we, as an entire CHHS team, we're working together, you know, with staff to kind of say, okay, this is how we've always done it, but now that we're starting from scratch, how, you know, does it make sense to continue to do that way? Some things work really well. There may be some adjustments, and we're not really to that big point yet. And at the same time, we know we need to get people into positions to help get the work done. So, so that's kind of in progress as well. And then finally, the communication piece is, you know, kind of the most tangible thing is that weekly update. However, you know, I think that the other part of that kind of works into the policy and planning of how we look at, you know, these different issues as a community, as we work on, you know, different regional response. So was this the one you were kind of thinking of? Okay. Let's see. I'm looking at a couple of these to see if a lot of this stuff is stuff that goes out in that weekly update. So I don't think it makes sense to go through all the specifics of these unless you had a specific question.
Can you show, is it either 3 or 4 where it sort of diagrams
This
where
one,
people are at? Yeah, but yeah, this sort of, yeah, this is.
we affectionately
very
call this,
busy.
we call this the spaghetti document, the spaghetti graph.
Mhm.
And it's really hard for you to read. I can totally appreciate that. However, it was a really great kind of, I think, eye opener for this, for anyone who doesn't know kind of what the body of work is, and especially how things are kind of the entry points for contact and communication and all of those different things. So, and again, this is kind of outdated, but you can see, you know, here's our staff, right? And this here, and they're getting direction and contact and you know, from all these different, and influences from all these different groups. We have the human services side of things. We have the housing services side of things.
Mute. Okay. So, but
And then we have and then another big thing and that we're working really hard to do is all of our funding sources. It's very complex, and I know I don't have to explain this to this group, but you know, we really don't have kind of that master dashboard spreadsheet of all the funding sources, you know, what their timelines are, and how that works as an entire department. You know, it's kind of works for program of work, but not for the entire department. So that's something that, and quite honestly, I think that's been kind of one of the gaps in the past, is that because that hasn't existed, we haven't been communicating, this body of work hasn't been communicated up very well because it was never in one place. And so you couldn't kind of create a dashboard talking point around it because it was so complex. So this just is kind of a good illustration of, you know, what was kind of going sideways and in every direction all the time. Anything else you wanted me to touch on that, Adrian?
No, I mean, I think I would say, that it's important that we're making sure that the citizen advisory boards are getting information. And I think where the communication difficulties began or were really, and so for the life of many of our board members, much of the time that they spent on the board, we've been dealing with an understaffed department, where there were often great staff who knew their area, and so depending on which committees you were on and those sorts of things, you would understand those sorts of deadlines and to expect certain funding cycles. But as we had fewer and fewer staff, that became much more complicated, and I recognize that for everyone, and we'll talk about this a little bit later with leadership and membership as well, but for everyone, most of our members on the board have only been here during these times when we haven't had a time for a retreat in the last 2 years, and which is a time that we do actually pause and really locate ourselves and locate the funding cycles and make sure that we as a board understand those, as opposed to it just being the knowledge of which committee you happen to sit on if you sit on a committee. So we haven't had that, and then we've had different folks having to take on additional responsibilities or take on extra jobs and things like that have made it that much more confusing. So I think, although we have, as Anna and I have talked about, since we've been here, every year that we've been on the board, there's been a different director of CHHS. So this communication issue and this confusion is certainly at sort of its peak. So what it's been, but this has been an ongoing thing, and we recognize that for many of our board members, there's a feeling of disconnection to the programs and to the staff, and that's something that we want to work on rectifying.
Absolutely, and I would completely echo that. Yeah, I'm probably similar to a lot of your board members. This is my second. I'm in 2 full years now, and so I've experienced the same thing. And I think there's a need and a desire and motivation and excitement to get back to that sort of a healthy and high functioning environment. And so for every day that we want to pull our hair out, we have wins every single day, and that's really fun. In fact, I'm getting chills thinking about it because this has been hard, and it's been hard. I mean, it's been hard for me, but the staff on this team, it's been really, really hard. And so, but just, such, I don't know, I can't say enough good things at how much they have stepped up to the plate and are investing and engaging and want, that same exact environment. So I'm happy to have any of our many staff people that are on this call chime in if they would like to. Let me see if there's anything else on the list that you won't read by tomorrow anyway. I think that's kind of about it in terms of, need to or urgent information.
Does anybody have any questions for Kirsten or for any of the other team members here?
All right. Thank you. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Okay, so we can shift to the RFP committee recommendation and these additional funds, and I'm handing that over to either Anne or Margaret or both, or I'll let you.
Let me just start. Margaret's going to do a great presentation to let you know how funds have been spent. We're talking about rental assistance funds. We've had a lot coming in, and you're going to be able to see where some of it's gone and where it could be going. And we hope at the end to have two motions to forward part of the funds that we have control over. So, Margaret, did I set the stage for you? Oh boy, I could be doing the presentation.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we
Okay,
can.
okay, great. Okay, so I'm gonna try to share.
Margaret, I've never told you this, but I feel like you and Lewis Miller, one of our head planners, live in the same basement.
Oh.
You have the same background. I was
The
like,
romantic lighting and the
yeah, the
and the
rustic.
blurred out. Yeah. Lucky us. All right. Okay, look, first slide is visible.
Yep,
Great.
we can see
Oh,
it.
great. Thank you, Anne. And thanks so much to the committee for making the time to review and make a recommendation on the program. Really appreciate your support. So before I dive into the program, I wanted to take a minute to review the funding sources, the funding that we're talking about. We think and speak about the rent assistance program as one program, but really there are two sources of funding and 4 separate awards so far for this program. And it's originated, the funding originates from the federal Treasury Department. And they've had, just the way that their appropriations work, they've separated the program into two funding rounds. And so the city's received 2 awards directly from the Department of Treasury, and then 2 awards passed through the state's Department of Commerce. This body has made a recommendation and will make a recommendation on the 2 awards from the state of Washington, the Department of Commerce. So in June, the committee and the board made a recommendation on the $9.2 million award. And today we're talking about the $10.1 million award that we just received. The requirements are set by the Department of Treasury. A household must demonstrate that they are income eligible. So they must be within 80% of the area median income. They must be able to demonstrate that they experienced a hardship during the pandemic and that they are housing unstable. And that could be a late rent notice, or it could be a late utility bill. They must be a resident of the city. And we are also prioritizing 50% AMI and below, and then households that have had folks unemployed for up to 90 days and beyond. This program covers 15 to 18 months of financial assistance. There's no cap on how much a household can receive. It's rather the cap is on the number of months, and so it covers past, current, and future rent, past and current utilities, and then there's some other housing costs like internet or late fees or moving costs that it can also cover. So between those 4 awards that I mentioned, we have a total of just over $31 million that's come to the city for rent assistance. That's not the that also includes administrative costs. So it's closer to 25 million that will actually go out into the community to cover rent and utilities. Out of the 31 million, 19.3 million is what this group, the board, has made a recommendation and will make a recommendation on. We're funding 3 organizations to administer and distribute the rent. Currently funding Family Promise, the Carl Maxey Center, and Live Stories. They each have their own networks that they work with, but I wanted to highlight that Live Stories has formal contractual relationships with local partners, the Zone, World Relief, Latinos in Spokane, and Catholic Charities. And those partners are they're on the ground. They're doing primarily outreach, marketing the program, and then supporting the application process. We also work really closely with the dispute resolution centers. We have 2 in our region, the Northwest Mediation Center and the Fulcrum Institute. And so as tenant protections like the eviction moratorium, the bridge moratorium is sunsetted, we're now in Washington State's eviction resolution program, where tenants all have rights to counsel, and they're promoting, every alternative to eviction. We are a key player in that work. And so I have a really great working relationship with those 2 entities. We also work extremely closely with SNAP. They started their rent assistance, their Treasury rent assistance program, which they administer all the funds for the county, and they started about 3 months ahead of us. And then before that, they were operating another COVID pandemic related rent assistance program for the city and the county. So they have a wealth of experience and have been an amazing resource for us that we've tapped. We've worked really hard to align our programs. Even our forms look almost identical, so that it's as simple as possible for residents and landlords. If they fill out the wrong form, and once we figure it out in the review process, we can reroute the application. So both tenants and landlords can apply. There's really no wrong door, but the front door where we're really pushing is the 2 online portals that Family Promise and Life Stories operate. But there also is phone options, call-in options, and then there's some in-person appointments that folks can make if they are not comfortable with online with some technology, or they don't have access to it. We also have our application in 9 languages. As I'd say the Biden administration took over the program in January, there's been evolving guidance that's come out and really promoted various flexibilities. That's promoted access, increasing access, and decreasing bureaucracy. So to all in the effort to get the funds out the door as quickly as possible. And we've taken advantage of several of those flexibilities, including what they call full self-attestation. So an applicant can declare in the application that their eligibility is true. They don't have to provide any documentation, and then we take them at their word. We also provide the opportunity for direct-to-tenant payments as well. So if a landlord chooses not to participate or is not responsive, we can make payments directly to tenants. We currently have an average processing time of 45 days. If everything is in place and landlords and tenants are responsive, it can be as fast as 30 days. We're working on that. Our goal is 2 weeks in turnaround time, but compared to the state, we're doing pretty good. They have a state average of 70 days.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Is that the turnaround, the processing time is that the end of it when money is in their hands?
It's when it's from the day they apply,
Uh-huh.
and it's a perfect application to the
right.
To the payment. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the average is they apply, 45 days later they get a check mailed or something.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
And this is flexed as we started and then ramped up. So this is where we're at now.
Yeah.
We've improved to 45 days. We wanted to share some program performance metrics with you. So these numbers are as of October 30th. We're just currently updating this and processing. We receive a pretty comprehensive report from our partners on a monthly basis. And so as of October, we've served just over 1,000 households, or provided assistance to 1,000 households. And that's about just over $7 million in rent and utilities. Our average payment is just over $6,000, and that's typically covering 7 months of rent. these numbers change. We get updates regularly. Right now we're processing another $1 million. So as we update our website bi-monthly, this you'll see different numbers every 2 weeks. And it really speaks to how we've ramped up the program. Sure, Barry.
Question. So, okay, assistance to 1,000 or 1,098. Is there how many are in the pipeline? Do you have a different number that are coming in the pipeline?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, we're just over 3,000. And some of those are not eligible. And I don't have a breakdown, unfortunately, of how many are not eligible. We also have done a kind of doing a communications push to bring folks into the queue. As part of the eviction resolution program, once a tenant is applied for assistance, it slows down the eviction process. So it's not a great number. It's a number we're working hard to bring, well, to get through to serve more of them.
I got another question.
Please.
I know this is impossible to answer, but do you have any idea of how many more might be out there who could apply and haven't?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
Yeah, I know. Probably no one does. Okay.
Margaret, do you want to speak to one of the statistics that jumped out at me is the number of folks that are receiving assistance that have never received or haven't received other assistance. Does that make sense? So
No, I don't.
I don't know what the actual number is now, but I want to say that, like, when the number was in the 900s, that over 800 of them had not received assistance in the past. So, which to me says a big thing of, people are accessing this assistance that have never had to access assistance before. And so if you're not used to trying to accessing assistance, it's complicated, or it's, it's one of those things that unless you've done it before or used to it, it can be difficult to navigate. And maybe I'm misspeaking on that, but I seem to remember that jumping out that, there are people reaching out that haven't typically reached out for assistance in the past.
Now, my assumption is this is a difficult process. It's not an easy process. So I'm impressed that there are that many new applicants and that we processed that many.
Well, and remember too, this really started in June, this particular funding stream, and we approved when we did in July. So everybody really has been ramping up. It is pretty remarkable. And I was anticipating, now that the moratorium is gone, more people will say, oh, maybe I better do something, or they'll be out. If they apply, then they can delay it. So yeah, you may have more applicants.
We expect to. And also, Barry, to your question, in our meeting, our stakeholder meetings with the states, none of the other jurisdictions really have a sense of the extent of the need either. It's been this is all been pretty novel.
I have a quick question. With a lot of the population I serve, when they're applying for different things and they go and they ask for help, the people that they go to ask for help about the question say, we can't help you. So is that the case with this type of application, where they're filling it out if they're struggling? Is there resources for them to ask for help and actually get help? Because it's almost like on our side of it, for the population I serve, it's that they want you to screw up the application so you don't get funding. And so they don't want to, it's like they don't want to help. So I was just wondering how this works.
Well, from top down, so from the federal government, I mean, you probably have seen some of the media on this about how they just really are anxious for the funds to get out the door, and have encouraged these flexibilities to decrease bureaucracy and ease access to the increase access to the funds. So that's what we're hearing from our grant administrators, to do whatever you can to make this a simple, low barrier process. And then in terms of our partners, I mean, we've been communicating that to our partners as well. So there's some, we're allowing for self-attestation, self-declaration in terms of eligibility. And sometimes you do have to kind of provide a little extra support in kind of how a person can like think about how they've been impacted by COVID. And so we're doing that and trying to again, I guess keep this as low barrier and accessible as possible. We have, you know, very specific partners. You know, we have Family Promise, who specializes with working with households with minors. We have the Carl Maxey Center, who is serving the African American community. You know, very culturally specific. World Relief, Refugees and Immigrants, the Zone, with their constituents, and Latinos in Spokane. And so there's definitely areas we see gaps and where we want to improve and bring some more partners on. And with this the second round of funding, there is opportunity and a little bit more administrative budget to do so. So we hope to expand our phone bank and have more in-person resources and bring some other partners on.
And I would also, I want to make sure everybody knows, when we were going through the RFPs, we didn't fund one program once. I think we didn't fund them the first time because they were not, it was all going to be via email. You had to do an online application, and we said, nope, there's got to be a walk-in, there's got to be somebody there to help them. So it's what we were trying to do with our partners at the time, and I think they're doing it.
Well, that's a nice segue into our demographics. We've been really pleased with that we are reaching our target populations. You know, I mentioned that we were prioritizing the households that are 50% AMI and under, and so we see that we are primarily serving 30% area median income and under. And then serving households of color, our goal was about 23% based on census, the county census data. And so, you know, much to the work of the Carl Maxey Center, and then some of the other partners like Latinos in Spokane and the Zone and World Relief, you know, we're near 40% serving households of color. So yeah, that's been really exciting that we're definitely in our meeting our milestones there. So those are part of our performance milestones for our partners. And then the last two bullets were just interesting. We thought you would find it interesting to know that the majority are identifying, the majority of applicants who are the head of households who are applying for the funds are identifying as female. And then about half of the assistance is going to these 3 zip codes. Barry?
That is stunning to me, those 3 zip codes. My name 207, I'm not surprised a bit, but 223 and 208, that I'm stunned by those zip codes.
I am too, because I live in 99223. It's up on the upper South Hill. I'm really shocked by that.
Yeah, and 208
but a lot of apartments.
208 is kind of around the Meade area.
Oh,
Well, right,
yeah.
but 99208 has a ton of low-income housing apartments throughout that whole, like all those apartments behind Twigs,
Yeah,
all the ones out on Hatch Road,
yeah.
all those are considered low-income housing.
Wow.
And
I do have-
you know, Go ahead.
Just a quick question. Do we have any statistics on households with the intellectually or developmentally disabled and if they're receiving any funding?
we don't. But I'd love to connect with you on how we could do that.
Okay.
I think one of the SKUs that, or what we're thinking of is single family homes. And remember, this is rent assistance. So it makes sense that there are pockets of apartment buildings, which, like, I live in 99208, the rows of apartments that went out on Indian Trail, and, you know, so, and that's kind of the thing we have to keep in mind, that this is rent assistance, and it doesn't it doesn't work for folks that are getting behind on their mortgages, right? Which we know that is happening as well. So that could be that little nuance that
Mhm.
I think when we think of neighborhoods, we think of single family homes and not apartment
Oh, yeah,
complexes.
yeah.
And we hope to get a little bit more sophisticated with the data we're collecting. And so we could definitely do a mapping exercise with the households and that's then we can bring it back and share it with you as well once we have that capability. Okay, and then I hope this translates onto your screen and that you can see the different colors. We wanted to share a spending projection of kind of where we're at and then where we will be shortly. So we have Live Stories, we have Family Promise and Carl Maxey on here. I'm really going to just refer to Live Stories and Family Promise in this discussion, but the dark blue and then the dark orange is that first tranche of funds that those two organizations received that was reviewed and distributed by the council. So that's that. So Family Promise is still in that grant. Live Stories, so the lighter blue, Live Stories has moved into the award that this body recommended back in June. And so they're about a third of the way spent and are projected to spend out in mid-December. And then they would be totally out of funds at that point. Family Promise will move into that award in towards the end of November, early December at the latest. And then they're based on the September and October spending would exhaust those funds in February 2022. So I think unless there's any other questions for me, the next two slides are, I'm going to hand over to Anne for review of the recommendations and the presentation of the latest recommendation.
Well, and what I wanted everyone to know, one of the reasons you're not covering Carl Maxey, because you might go, well, what about them? One, they didn't apply to us for funding, and two, they're now joining up with Live Stories. So they'll be getting funding through there. So back in June, we made the following recommendations. We had 9.2 million. We recommended Live Stories get the 6.6, Family Promise 2.5. One of the requirements that we had when we did it as a committee was we wanted partnership. We didn't want to just give to one organization. We really wanted to see a partnership develop, and Live Stories had that partnership. They've expanded their partnership. So this is how it is right now. They have contracts in place. 30% is spent down and realized they got their funds late July, correct?
Right.
So
Mhm.
August, September, October, in 3 months, they've spent that amount of money. Family Promise, it was still using the funds that they got previously. They've not contracted with any partners at this point, and the only contract that they were going to have was with Emmanuel Life Center, but that hasn't happened. Partly it's capacity. They're really kind of doing as much as they can with the staffing that they have. We did have funds in there with the 2.5 that they could bring on some new staff to kind of go out and recruit, do some of the work. But so far they haven't spent any of those funds. Next slide, last slide.
Can I ask a question there?
Yeah,
So
go back.
can you explain? That sounds like a problem to me if there's 2.5 million there and it's not
Right.
being used.
Right. It is for us too. That was the RFP committee, God bless them. I got a hold of them on Friday and I said, could you meet on Monday? And I think we ended up meeting yesterday, correct? Yeah, yesterday morning.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So we met yesterday morning and they were great. They went through this presentation and then we had a discussion. We're concerned about Family Promise. Not that they don't do good work, but they have a niche, which is families. The others can do families also. They're not the only one doing families, but that's their niche. If a single household comes in, 2 adults living in the household, they're going to refer them out. Single person, they're going to refer them out. So, and they've really had our understanding, and Margaret, please correct me if I'm wrong, they've had trouble getting staff. So that's the other reason that they're behind, which came up at our meeting yesterday. So now let me go into the next one because we had the same reaction, Barry. So next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. After a lot of discussion, one of the decisions that we made initially was we didn't want to have to go out and do a whole new RFP. Not because we didn't want to do it, but we need to get this money spent and we need to get it spent as quickly as possible. So our first motion was basically recommend that the 10.1 million, and this is Department of Commerce funding, rental assistant funds, be used with the same 2 programs. However, because of the capacity and the lack of partnership, we wanted to reduce the amount of funds awarded to Family Promise. We did leave that up to the staff that they could figure out what the need was and make that reduction. We're not doing a percentage. We didn't even get to that place. Our meeting went pretty long. So thoughts about that?
Could you go back to the slide that shows what the original awards were, what the split was?
Yeah.
Just because it already was a quite
Previously.
different split,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Or,
There.
all the way back.
No, this,
All
the
right.
one just previous.
Okay.
There. Correct? That's the one you
Yeah,
want?
so that
Yeah.
was the original awards to each,
Right.
right? And is this graphic just pulling the Carl Maxey one into the Live Stories one?
Well, in June, that 9.2 million, we did not award anything to Carl Maxey.
Okay,
They
Yeah.
didn't apply.
you said that,
No.
that's right.
Yeah, they didn't
Okay.
apply. So, and
So
we
are
knew
you, is your suggestion a reduction? So if we took the proportion here and applied
Uh-huh.
that to the 10 million, are you then suggesting a reduction in what that original proportion was?
Yeah, no, just for the new monies coming in.
Yeah, no, I know. So
Yeah.
we have 7 million to 2.5
Right.
million. That's the
Right.
ratio. And so if you applied that to the 10 million, you would then reduce the
Right.
award more.
Well, and the other
Anybody
thing,
have that just math so we have a sense of what numbers we're
Yeah.
talking about?
I know.
Well,
Um,
and I guess,
Mark, oh, sorry.
sorry, I guess my concern too is Life Stories. I mean, yeah, they've done almost 2 million, but really consider their award, it's not very much either.
well,
And so what I'm wondering, you know, is there enough partners out there to actually help get these funds out?
And-
it's a good
Can I-
point, but realize that Live Stories has numerous partners. The other thing is what you're seeing is not, some of those funds, I'm assuming, have been allocated. So if I get an application in and I'm within that 45-day mark, they've allocated those funds. They may not have spent them, but that's why they know by the end of December, they will have gone through that whole pot. That's 6.6 by the end of December.
And can I add, Anne,
Yeah.
because I don't think I was clear before that both Family Promise and Live Stories have spent a separate award first.
Right.
So Live Stories is really about I think they're like 7 million, or no, their first award was I think 4 million direct, 4 or 5 million. So they're like 6 million in to the entire program. And same with livestock or Family Promise is, they're currently spending a $2 million award and kind of stuck in that. They haven't touched this one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, that's what I was gonna say is just because they haven't spent this tranche of funds
Right.
that this group awarded, they have spent out the ERA funds. And are they at about 80% on that, Margaret? Do you remember?
Yes.
Yeah, they've spent about 80% of that first chunk of money. They're just, I think the way we've designed is that instead of spending the money simultaneously, it's like, okay, that's done, let's move to the next pot. That's done, let's move to the next pot, instead of complicating it with the process of two different tranches at the same time.
But Bob, that's a really good point. And we kind of did the same thing. So thanks. Barry.
I'm just waiting for the end of this, that I'm hoping you will have a recommendation for the quickest way to get that money out, because that's
Right.
what I will support, the quickest way to get that money out.
Good. So could you go to the next slide, the motion? We had exactly the same thing. And once we approve it today, what happens, Margaret and Kirsten, to our saying, this is what we want? And I'm sorry, Betsy's not on tonight.
Do you want to answer, Kirsten?
Yeah, I can start, and then so this is why we kind of chose this route, is that we wanted to have this evaluated and then make this recommendation from what we consider to be, you know, the subject matter experts of this work, and then make those recommendations to City Council. We are going to give, I'm not going to say this exact presentation because we're going to have to apply the ERA funds during the Urban Experience Committee meeting on Monday, so that they have this information, you know, the same kind of information to make that decision. And then what will happen is we will basically, I don't know, it's not a contract. What is it, Margaret? Like they'll have to vote to approve what these recommendations are, but I can't remember what format that turns into.
Yeah, we would make a proposal of the award amount.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
contract.
and then they would vote on that at a council level. And once that gets done, then we just keep filling the coffers.
Well, and our hope would be that it's done by the end of the month, because come December, they're going to be out of funds and they need more. And December is not a good time to be out of funds. So
And that's exactly why we were rushing your RFP group to meet
Yeah.
yesterday so we could do this
Yeah.
tonight.
Right.
And then we could present to council on Monday. And then we should be able to have a first reading on the, what would that be, the 16th, Margaret? Anyway, so we should be able to get this through by the end of the month if we stay on this track. So that's also important because it's a priority for council too. So I'm not quite, you know, I know that they'll move as quickly as they can, and they can even take the opportunity during their study sessions to have an executive action happen, you know, since it's a public meeting, like on a Thursday or whatever, and they may choose to do that. But the other thing is that December is always a real challenge because they're done with meetings by the 13th or something. And then it's heavy with budget and things like that. So for all sorts of reasons, that's really why we were pushing that RFP committee to review this, and Margaret and Kelsey have just done a fabulous job in taking all this information and getting it into kind of a digestible, you know, format so that we can kind of share and answer those questions that you guys have had, and I know other folks will too.
The other point is we wanted to be able to make a very strong statement that we don't want this to go out to an RFP. And City Council could say, no, we want it to go back out. And there may be some pressure for them to do it, but we think we have control over the 10.1. They have control over 5 point something.
5.3.
Yeah, 5.3. So
I have a couple
they
of
may decide to do
recommendations.
it.
First of all, in the first motion, I think that you should include the language of not running an RFP because of urgency to
Okay.
release these funds. And then second, the clarifying point, I'm totally in support of staff deciding how you would break that up. But I think we have to be clear what we're saying because council is going to be looking at specific numbers. And
Right.
so based on what we did for the first award, Family Promise got 27% of that funding. 27% of this funding would be 2.75 million. So, we are saying less than that is in the second motion. Is
Right.
that right? So I think
Yeah.
we just might want to be clear about the numbers because that could get lost in when the staff
Right.
is working on it and our recommendation could be out of line with other decisions that get made. So I want to make sure that it's as clear as possible.
So could we make a recommendation of 1.5? What percentage would that be? Barry?
Well, I was wondering, have we talked with Live Stories and Family Promise that something like this is coming down the pipeline?
Yes.
Okay, so, and they basically they would understand if we do this. Is that right?
What part, what do you mean? Which part
Well,
of that?
why we would give a smaller percentage to Family Promise, a greater percentage to Live Stories, because we want the money to get out as quickly as possible. And so far, this is what we've seen. So that's why we're going to be making this change. Would they get that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So we have regular meetings on a weekly basis with the providers and they see their numbers side by side. I mean, they might not like it. Family Promise
Yeah.
might not like it, but
Yeah.
but it wouldn't be a surprise, I'd
Okay,
say.
I just wouldn't want us to approve this and then we go to the city council and Family Promise chimes in and says, hey, what the heck are you doing here? This is out of the blue. And no, we
Yeah.
could say, well, we've discussed this. You know why we're making this decision.
Well, and the RFP committee was very clear that we wanted them to have partnership, and they wrote the RFP proposal with that in there, and nothing's happened. And yes, I know it's only June, July, but at least some overtures. But there's been no overture or no report. Here's what we're doing to create that partnership, as near as
Well-
we could hear.
Yeah. And then why should we even give them 1.5 million? I mean, my feeling is that they don't just,
Right?
well, yeah, I'm kind of with what Barry's saying is zero. But I don't know if that's politically the best to do, but I wouldn't go over 500,000 to be honest with you.
The RFP committee felt that we wanted Family Promise to join up with the zone, that they could be one of their partners and continue to get funding. So we could, as a committee, as a board, make that recommendation. And I know that the board would, the committee would support that.
They also have the option, just like Carl Maxey did, to utilize the Live Stories platform
Yep.
and be a partner in that. So,
Yep.
and
could.
I don't think, I think that's just a tough pill for them to swallow. I don't think it's about, I think it's just more of a tough pill to swallow than it is, and whether or not they want to, they do that or not.
Personally, I don't care about someone swallowing a tough pill. I want the money out. That's
Thank
my
you.
number one
Yeah.
priority.
I agree.
Well, and keep in mind, the county contracted with SNAP just off the bat to do all of their distribution. They didn't even do an RFP process. So, so the county is operating with a one vendor or a one partner agency, which I don't know exactly how SNAP's program works, but they're not doing this kind of work that Live Stories is, where I don't think so, where they're partnering with World Relief and these other embedded community programs that are reaching underrepresented, higher impacted population.
Well, and we really, we, the committee, have been emphasizing a one door approach. Whatever door you go in, a no wrong door approach. Whatever door you get in, you're going to get services depending on whatever your need is, not necessarily say, oh, you have to go over here to get that service. So we can, due to the end of the eviction moratorium and ongoing needs of the community, the RFP evaluation committee recommends not going out for a new RFP, and that we disperse the $10.1 million Commerce Rental Assistance Funds to Live Stories. Did you get all that down? Luckily, we're
Yeah, I
being
don't know who's taking notes for us, but you might have to run through that again.
Oh,
And so rather
again.
than the two, we would just say the one.
Right.
Yeah, we should include that, the reason for pulling back, from not adding to Family Promises funds, because of their stated issue around capacity and their lack of partnerships.
If they want more funding, they can partner with. the
Yeah.
other group.
Yep.
Excuse
So
me,
that's
I'd like to
that's
make a statement, a correction to what was said earlier. Spokane County did do an RFP for our funding, and we had a few organizations apply, and they were actually very small, very niche, did not have capacity, did not want to serve all individuals, only a few, and so we did not accept them. We actually had to reach out to SNAP and ask them if they would do it, and
That's
they
right.
didn't want to do it. We had to talk with them and persuade them and really try to work with them to make it work. And so I just wanted to make that correction that we always do an RFP, and did so in that case. But Kristen is correct. We did not do it to multiple organizations in the way the city of Spokane has. And I think that's great that the city of Spokane is doing that. But I just wanted to correct that we absolutely follow that's our protocol. We did do an RFP. So thank you.
Yeah, I
Thank you so
apologize.
much for that correction,
Yeah.
Kathleen.
I apologize for misspeaking. Thank you.
So we gotta try to describe the motion again,
Yeah.
and again, I'm not sure who is taking notes on this or how slow that we need to
Yeah.
walk.
Danielle
taking
is
the
taking
notes.
notes.
And I'm also recording it.
Good. And you wanna try?
Try it one more time. Okay. Due to the end of the eviction moratorium and ongoing needs of the community, the evaluation committee recommends that no RFP.
I'm gonna pause you. Shouldn't it be the board? You're recommending this to us, but it's the
Oh,
board
yeah,
that's
yeah,
recommending
yeah,
this to
yeah.
council.
You're right. Okay, back to the drawing board.
Sorry.
So due to the end of the eviction moratorium and ongoing needs of the community, the CHHS board recommends that no new RFPs be not submitted, be
Issued.
Issued. Thank you.
Or just
Issued.
that there be no RFP issued.
Okay, and that the $10.1 million Department of Commerce Rental Assistance funds be distributed to Live Stories due to the capacity. I don't know how I put this in there gracefully.
Due lack of capacity.
Due to lack of capacity, all the funds be distributed to Live Stories, period. We recognize that Family Promise has had an issue with capacity and lack of partnership. We would like them to join up with Live Stories.
For
Did I
any
do
additional
it?
funding.
Yeah, for additional funding. Everybody comfortable with that?
I would say if they desire more funding, I wouldn't push them toward it, I would say, if you want more funding, go to Live Story.
Yeah. So Kirsten and Margaret, politically, are you going to be able to take that forward?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, I know that city council has been a really strong proponent of family promise, and we've gotten some feedback when we haven't supported them. We're basically saying they're just not at the capacity that we need them to be at. And you're going to be walking this forward with our approved recommendation.
I
Right,
think you can
um,
speak to the
oh.
urgency of getting the money out as one of those reasons as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's more of a communications issue than it is a political issue.
okay.
Because I think everyone has that mindset of this money just has to get out. And we are seeing it just, you know, exponentially go faster every day. I mean, you know, because there was so much time to get the system set up and then to get it out there, you know, and I think that's been the frustrating part. But when you start seeing, you know, when Margaret and Kelsey are seeing these check requests come through at, you know, the levels that they are all of a sudden, then we're on a roll. And the
Yeah.
last thing we want to do is to throw a barricade up there and cause a detour.
Yeah. I really like what Danielle put in. Thank you. I'll read it if you want. Want me to read
In the
it?
chat, can all the
In
board
the
members
chat,
put that in
yeah.
the chat?
Due to the end of eviction moratorium and ongoing needs of the community, the board recommends that no new RFPs be issued and that the $10.1 million rental assistance funds be fully distributed to Live Stories. We recognize that Family Promise has had an issue with capacity, and if they would like additional fundings, they can reach out to Live Stories. Good job.
Should we specify Department of Commerce in there? Or
Oh yeah, that needs to be in there.
Department of Commerce with the 10.1 funding.
Yeah.
10.1 award from Department of Commerce?
No, we'll just give them $10 million. We don't care where it comes
We'll
from.
find it.
Yeah. From the city coffers, they're slush fund.
Our staff savings.
Yeah, that's it.
So do you
Yeah,
need a
just
second on
put
that?
that in there.
We need it, we
Yeah,
need the motion,
I need a motion.
and then, yeah, we need the motion first. You don't have to say all of those words, you can just say that you move to go forward with that.
Move to go forward with what is written there.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Second.
Yeah.
Thanks, Catherine. Any more discussion or questions? All those in favor say aye, or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Do I get to vote? I think I do.
You get to vote.
Okay.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. That is our recommendation. We'll send to
Woohoo!
city council.
Thanks,
No.
everyone.
When
Thank you.
this is all said and done and all the money has gone out, will there be a report that comes back to us that actually shows the actual impact that happened due to the funds?
Yep. We're supposed to be doing that with, I mean, that's part of what the RFP and evaluation committee, we look at that and then we bring that forward.
And I'm happy, my colleague Kelsey Martin and I are happy to come back anytime we have the monthly reports, so we can provide monthly updates as desired.
Maybe at the beginning of the year, you could let us know where things stand, January, February, if we have a January meeting.
And we usually include that information in those weekly updates as well. So there's a few ways that you can, and as soon as we have updated numbers, we put them on the website on that page. So there's a few ways to get it.
I
Great,
guess it'd be kind of neat to, instead of just seeing the dollars and what was spent,
right.
is to actually know the impact that was made on some families, some actual
Right.
stories behind this. Because,
Yeah.
That's
I know-
a great, yeah.
because I know that a lot of voters and a lot of people out in the community are just thinking we're just throwing money out there. They don't really understand the impact or what it's really doing.
Yeah.
And so instead of just knowing what dollars are going out, it'd almost be nice to get some stories behind it.
That's a great point, Bob. And actually, we just, thank you, Barry, but we just got some information from Live Stories to connect us with, these local programs so that I can put our communications team and resources at the city behind doing some, those human interest stories and sharing those experiences and how that's been beneficial. So that's in the works as of this morning.
Thank you.
And Kirsten, I appreciate that there's various ways we can go out and look at it, but actually having Margaret come back and say, here's what's been going on, and having a discussion, not just a reading stuff, is really beneficial.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's
Absolutely.
exactly what I was
Yeah.
gonna say, and yeah, it's important for us. Also, because there are so many places to find
Yeah.
some of this information, it's good to have it in a presentation that we can discuss. Also, that we can discuss as part of a public meeting. So, yeah, I look forward to continuing to hear about this. And I want to thank, of course, the staff for scrambling to get this together, and Anne and the RFP and evaluation committees for getting a chance to meet, being able to organize that so quickly. I think we all had the same sentiment to get this money out as soon as possible. So really great work, and this was a lot to chew on in a meeting with no pre-work for. So I appreciate the board's attention to this as well.
Yeah.
So thank you all.
I would highly recommend that, maybe this should be an agenda item for every monthly meeting that, we get an update that we can share. Margaret, there's no reason we couldn't do that. And I think that makes total sense. So.
That's a great idea, Kirsten, thank you.
Hi,
Okay.
this is Daniel. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to, I'm on the team with Margaret at CHHS, one of the few staff left. And I just wanted to say, at a tactical level, what Kelsey and Margaret are doing is just such great work, and they really are putting in the hours and the efforts. And since there's not really anyone on the program team here, I'll just sort of speak on behalf of what that group would be, and what they would say here is, at a strategic level, me looking at the homeless data, what they're doing upstream to keep folks from coming into the emergency response system is just of such high value for the community. So I just want to say thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Kelsey.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you
point.
so much for that. Yeah.
Thanks,
yeah.
Daniel.
Yeah. All right. Well, so really good work. You feel really good about that. Now we need to have a conversation about board leadership and membership. So we have not had anyone step forward to put their name in for the executive committee. And this is a problem. And this is, we've sort of paused on working on the other committee structure, because there might be folks who are willing to do one extra committee, and exec might be it. We are in a position where Anne and I will be stepping off the board in April. So that's obviously the chair's role is vacated. But technically it should end in December for me, being the chair of the board. We also, oh, great, Catherine, thanks. We also need to have 2 vice chairs. Jerry, I had a great conversation with Jerry, and she is away for work today. This is why she's not here, but we had a great chat yesterday. And 2 things that I want to share that she talked about. First of all, we spent some time talking about, like I mentioned earlier, how this has been a difficult 2 years for our new board members, with the constant transitions, with not being able to have the retreats, et cetera. So we recognize how disconnected folks might be feeling from the work, the good work that we do. This was a great example of the kind of good work that we get to work through. The discussion we just had. And she wanted to say that she has really enjoyed her time on the executive committee. That especially during these last 2 years, that's been a space where she has come to much better understand the role of the board. And I would say that, and Anne can speak to this too. I would say Anne and I would echo that. We were both brought to the executive committee really quite shortly after we started on the board. So there is not a specific expertise that's needed, and it can actually help you gain expertise in some other areas. The other thing that I want to share is that Jerry is willing to stay on as vice chair for another year. Her capacity is not such that she can become chair, but she's willing to stay on as vice chair for another year, so long as there are folks stepping up to also be vice chair and chair, because she does not want to become the de facto chair if she's the only one left on the executive committee. So I really want to honor, everybody's time, capacity issues. So we really need, normally we would at this point be sharing whose names would be going forward, and then December we would vote on it, and they start at the beginning of the year on the executive committee. But as I said, we haven't had folks step up who have been interested in doing so. So this is a bit of a plea. Jerry and I are willing to ask for an extension until we transfer to the new executive team. So it might not start in January, it might not start until February. We're willing to stick it to there, but we are hoping that people will step up before we have to step back. So Catherine, I appreciate you saying this in the chat. I don't know, Anne, do you have anything that you would like to add? You're muted, I think.
Trying to be good. I'm leaving in December to go back to Mexico. I will join as I'm available to do that, but I'm done in April. I'm the chair of the RFP committee. I am the unexec, partly because of that, and also because I'm the past chair. So we really need you guys to step up, and it has been an ugly way to come onto the board. Very different when we're meeting in person, sitting down across from each other, getting to know each other, seeing staff, being able to ask the questions of staff, having retreat. I am so sorry that this has been the case for you guys. I don't know what will happen if we don't have anybody stepping forward. We don't have that in the bylaws. To what happens if we don't have an executive board. So don't have a clue. That's why you don't have bylaws, by the way, because we're like, what do we do?
Yeah, and I would say, and I've got a couple of private chat, and so we can reach out. I would also say, just for capacity, just so people know capacity, for a vice chair, it's really just coming to an extra meeting is what it is, and if we hold them at the same time as this board meeting, just on the third Wednesday, a different Wednesday, but it's at the same time. It's usually only an hour and a half long, so that's really the extent of it. And the chair position, I mean, it is there. Hopefully, when things get settled, there's some pre-planning for the executive meeting, but it isn't much more than preparing the agenda for the executive meeting. And then in the executive committee meeting, that's where we set up the agenda for the full board meeting. So it time commitment wise and expertise level, it is not, I think people find it are worried it's going to be daunting, or they don't understand the funding enough, or those sorts of things. I would say that Ann and I echoed those concerns, and it turned out to not really be an issue. You actually just learn a lot more, get a lot of things reinforced. So it's not as daunting of a task to take on
Just wait a minute.
as it may sound. So I have a couple of folks who have responded in chat to everyone and to me, and I'll reach out to you. But anyone else who would like to talk about this a little bit more, I'd be grateful. Jerry would be grateful. The great news is that so long as we get the other positions filled, you'll have Jerry's expertise for a full year as a good transition. And I'd also say that even though, so I would stay on the executive team through April as the former chair. That's a normal exec position. But I'm not going to disappear in April. So, I would also be there to be helping the vice chairs and chair get sort of get a process and a pattern, and then also I would say be able to touch base about helping with planning a retreat, because the people planning a retreat will never have been to a retreat, nor will most of the staff who will be attending the retreat.
Wow.
So, I would be available for that, and as well as we get these positions, the new director hired and things like that, talking about what the process should be like when the staff the department is more filled with staff. So I won't be. Oh, good, Catherine. That's great. Okay, fantastic. And then the second thing I wanted to share is that for these first round of vacancies for the board, we did receive 6 applications. 2 of them we have some concern over conflict, so we'll have to reach out to talk to those folks to see if they have a conflict of interest. But also, as long as we don't end up with quorums, we just have to be careful of numbers. We'll be reaching out to those folks who want to continue with the process to set up a time to meet with the executive meet with the executive committee, but there would be space if anyone is interested in participating in those interviews as well. So if that is something that you're if that's something that you're interested in, please either in the chat or reach out to me, because we'll be I'm just thinking practically about my week, probably the beginning of next week, be starting to work on scheduling some of those interviews and reaching out to those folks. And an interesting, so 2 things that I think are interesting about that, the interview is not just who we want to select, but we also tell them what to expect for being on the board. So it's great to have other voices or people who have been in other roles on the board to be able to share that information with folks. And it's also a great opportunity, if you remember back to your interview, to learn a little bit more or be reminded again about some of the work we do, because we also go over what it is that we do on this board. So I just want to open that invitation and have you reach out to me if you're interested in participating. As I schedule those interviews, I will probably just make those times available to the whole board so that you can say, hey, I'd like to show up for 1 or 2 of those ones, and we can get it scheduled that way. Any questions about that? And one more thing about that, we have 6 applications, we have 3 spots. We're under no obligation to fill those 3 spots with those. No, we're going to do another round, Ann, for the next one.
Oh, okay.
But we are under no obligation to fill those 3 spots with these applicants. If we find that people are conflicted, or if we have concerns or those sorts of things, as much as we want the board to be more full, we do not need to put people on the board just because there's a spot open. We can reopen the application process and work through that again.
So one point I wanted for you guys to know, usually there's 5 people on the executive committee. because you've got the chair, 2 vice chairs, actually 6. You've got the past chair, which you couldn't do it this time. And then you've got the chair of the RFP and the chair of the affordable housing. Right now, there's 3 of us because I'm past chair, but I'm also chair of the RFP committee. Adrian is chair, but she's also chair of the affordable housing. So it really spreads it thinner if you can have more people on that board. You have to make sure that you don't have more than 50% of your membership. So that's another issue. So just be aware that we really need RFP chair, affordable housing chair, and a vice chair. Please.
And a chair.
A chair, yeah, and a vice chair.
Yep.
And a chair.
Yeah.
You don't need a
Alright.
past chair. You don't have to do that.
Any other questions or comments about any of that?
I've learned a lot, honestly, doing this position. Coming up on almost 6 years, 5.5 years now. I've learned so much, and I ended up going as a vice chair within months because they needed people. And then Adrian was like right behind me the next year. So we've been doing this executive the whole time, really.
And I'd also say that while like Jerry has expressed that she's not interested in becoming chair, that while it's customary that one of the vice chairs becomes chair, it's not required by our bylaws. But it's also, as you serve as vice chair, you're not required to become chair. That's part of why we have 2. Is hopefully one of them will feel ready and step into that. But also, just time-wise. So Rebecca Serro, who came on with Ann and I, also served as vice chair without ever the intention of becoming chair. So, we want to make sure we're getting the voices into that executive committee is our concern. So please talk to me about any concerns of barriers. And I did note in the chat the folks that reached out.
Yeah, and so it's not a first chair and a second chair, it's just co-vice chairs. So there isn't like you automatically move into it. Adrian and I had to arm wrestle for it. And I won. I don't know why. But we arm wrestled at the meeting when we were coming up with nominations. So yeah, another story.
I like that story better, Ann.
Yeah, you like that story better than, I'll tell you over whiskey, the other story, how we ended up chair.
Are there people on the RFP and the Affordable Housing Committee interested in chairing those committees?
It can only be, honestly, right now it's Jerry and I are the only board members that are on there right now. And it has to be a board member to be a chair. And pretty much the whole committee is past members. You've got Diane and Arlene and Fran. And then we've got Rowena, bless her heart, she keeps moving jobs and keeps saying, nope, I'll stay with you. And then Sarah from Providence. It's a great group. I mean, really knowledgeable group. So
Catherine, I'd say to your question, as we reach out to talk to folks, if you're interested in serving in dual roles or in serving on the executive as chair of the RFP, we can have those conversations as well.
Yeah.
So, but just keeping in mind that we need to get the 2 vice chairs and the chair position set for the board as a priority. So Jerry doesn't feel like she needs to step back from the vice chair role. But yeah, we can talk about some different ways you could be engaged in the executive committee, different roles. Okay, so I assume that the board education department plan, the director's report was rolled into that. Is that right, Kirsten? You don't have anything else? The only thing that I would just add, I guess, director report adjacent is just to let the board know that there was a candidate who had been interviewing for the NHHS position, and there was a meeting some point in time last week where city council members, myself in this role on the board, Catherine in her role on the board, and with community assembly, that we were invited to participate in that interview process. That's the extent of what I know about it. I don't know what's happened, and I was at the end of last week, so I'm guessing that there isn't a decision of any sort, but there was an interview that we participated in.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have that on in my report. So yes, there was an external panel, which you were a part of, that you described, and then an internal panel as well with staff. So, but yeah, that's still being discussed, but those are the two things that happened that day.
All right, so we don't have any city council members here, so I'm guessing we're not going to have an update there.
Can I just make one comment? And this might be Kirsten, you need to know this. Kate was assigned to us, and I know she sort of dropped out, but I don't know whether it's your position or who, but city council needs to know that they need to appoint 2 people. I'm hoping Betsy will stay with us, but we don't know who the other person is. Yeah.
Yeah, so what I experienced during the last kind of turnover, or you know what I mean, election, when new positions were taken is, and I think it was Brandy in the mayor's office that kind of headed this up, that, you know, supplies all of the different committees and things that have, you know, council members assigned, and she works with council to kind of do that. So I'll put it on my radar, but, you know, there's other councils or other,
Oh, yeah.
you know, other groups that will be in the same situation.
Okay. Well, and we'd be more than happy to meet with them if they, especially the new people coming on. Yeah. And Karen loved being on, but she went on the SNAP board.
She actually, she also mentioned though that she's getting close to the end of her term for that, so she might be
Oh.
interested in being the rep again, which would be fantastic.
That would be great if she came back.
Yeah.
She was really knowledgeable.
Yeah.
So.
And really good at asking the questions that always started, this might be a weird question, but, or this might be a dumb question, but, and then asking those questions that really helped us dig into some things that, yeah.
Well, and also their role was to really come and tell us, here's what's going on with city council. And we haven't had that since Mike and Karen left. So we'd really like that.
As for committee updates, the Affordable Housing Committee has not met, and so I guess I have a question rather than an update. Are we meeting this month? Because I know that the SNAP repair programs and things are up, and usually the Affordable Housing Committee gets a report on those.
Could I ask a question? Adrian, your comments sparked something in me, because on the housing subcommittee in the Preserve Housing Working Group, we were interested in the SNAP repair program and were told that that no longer exists, that was eliminated by city council because they didn't do anything, but that there was some other program. And I've asked Melissa for more information about it. But does anybody here know anything about that?
Yeah, I can speak to that, Catherine. And you should have got my email earlier today in response to that. So,
Yep.
And this is a big problem that we have with like city council having a housing work group and then having the affordable housing work group is there's complete disconnects between what's actually happening and then what's being talked about. So, the rental repair program, that was a legacy program that the old community development department had for some time. It went away because it wasn't utilized that well. And then council had asked if this was when Paul Troutman was still here, asked if he would be willing to look at piloting that program again. So he did. And that program, I think we gave it 2 years. Adrian, you probably are going to know more on this than me, but effectively gave it 2 years, and we did 2 loans in that time, and the admin costs were greater than what was actually delivered. And so there was some grace that was offered on that to try and see if it could get off the ground,
Right.
and it just never did. And so the Affordable Housing Committee, similar to what you all just discussed about, like with Family Promise, where if it's not working and it's costing us more to administer than what's going to the community, then is that making the best use of these really important resources? And so the committee made the determination to not renew that contract. Now, one of the things that's happened in this conversation is folks have made maybe some assumptions that some of the other programs that SNAP have no longer exist as well, and that is not accurate. Those programs have been around probably as long as I've been alive, which that doesn't mean I'm young. They've been around for a long time and continue to perform incredibly well. You know, I'll take some ownership that I have not spent enough time highlighting that when I do the annual action plan and the CAPER. I try to, but it seems like it doesn't stick when I highlight that stuff. But that's certainly something that we need to do a better job of relaying that. Those are for the CDBG program, that those 2 programs, the single family rehab and the essential repair program, those 2 programs make up probably about 70% of the total CDBG expenditures on a year over year, keeping people that own their homes stably housed. So they're the most important programs that exist from my perspective in, well, I'll just say within the portfolio that I'm associated with, because they keep people stably housed and provide those resources. And as an added bonus, these programs actually generate revenue to continue to serve the community. So they're there, they exist, and that will be the Affordable Housing Committee meeting. Is that next week or in 2 weeks, Adrian? I sent the meeting invite. I just don't. I'm on my phone here, so I don't have my calendar in front of me.
I function very like day to day. What am I supposed to be doing? So let me see real quick. Which it's either next week or the following Tuesday, but I feel like it's the second Tuesday of the month. So next week.
Thank you, George.
So that was also thanks, George, and Catherine, that we did try that. Took a small percentage of the program funding that's successful, and tried to again work on the rental repair assistance, and ran into there were just a lot of barriers. It was very difficult to get the word out. It was very difficult to get both the owner and the renter to provide information, and so all of those things happened. So that pilot program we gave, I think we gave it an extension to try there, because there were a couple, 2 projects that were not yet done, but it just didn't seem like it was feasible. It seemed like the issues were too large, and importantly, because I don't think we ever got back to this, one of the things that the Affordable Housing Committee wanted to do was to work with staff to identify if a program like this is working in other communities, what they're doing differently, those sorts of things. So we wanted to dig in a little bit more to see if we should consider a different structure and try it again, or find out if it just turns out that this kind of a program doesn't work in other communities either. So that was something last spring when we said we didn't want to continue the program, that we were hoping to get to dig into some in the Affordable Housing Committee.
I might recommend also trying to partner with the landlord association. Because I know in my own case, when I applied for those funds, my landlord never responded. And it wasn't until 2 years later when we were physically present with each other and I chided him saying, well, you know, I tried to get the house fixed, but you wouldn't go along with it. And he was shocked. He didn't really connect with what I was saying. So I think if there was some outreach to the landlord association, that might help.
Yeah, that's really helpful. That's really helpful, Catherine. And that was sort of what we wanted to do, was be able to take some time to ask some of those questions and think about those partnerships and think differently about the program.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would also add that AltQ does some funding for minor home repair, and that's also through SNAP. So there's additional funds, but yeah, you're right. The landlord has to agree to the repairs. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big challenges with any of the rental is the government will have a stake in their property. And as a government employee, I wouldn't want my government having a stake in my property.
It was so
Uh,
minor. It was so minor, George. The only thing they had to do was not raise the rent and not sell the property for 3 years. I mean, I thought that was so minor. And they just didn't understand it.
Especially what they'd be getting out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a little more complex than that.
Oh,
But
there's attitude.
yeah.
And I thought it was fascinating that we also found that the renters didn't want to, because they also have to show they also had to share their financial information. And so there's things that they weren't excited that their landlord might find out about their own financial. So there were lots of barriers that we were finding. And yeah, so we're seeing if another community somewhere has figured out how to make this work. But
That's interesting to know.
yeah,
That's an interesting thing that, and I think Kelsey and Margaret are gone, but one of the barriers that we have been having with the rent assistance is one of the really turnkey things that Live Stories does is for the landlords to, because you know a lot of times we pay, the money goes straight to the landlord, and they don't want to give up bank information for ACH deposits, or they just, it's hard to track them down to get that information to get them paid. So it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, I'm not generalizing. I'm just saying that has come up as a little bit of a barrier along the way.
Well, and Steve
I think one of
Corker
the areas.
Go, George.
Sorry, Ann. I was just going to say, I think one of the areas where the rental repair program has worked well in other communities is when it's more directly tied with nonprofit providers as opposed to your private markets, because they already have those. They're used to those conditions. So because what happens is if the tenant moves out during the term of that landlord, during the term of that repair, so if it's 5 years that you have to have it dedicated for a low moderate income individual to meet the national objective eligibility requirement, then they can't just bring in whoever they want as their next tenant. They have to bring in someone that meets all of this criteria. So they've got the additional screenings and everything that just make it a lot more difficult for them to be able to do business how they would like to do it when it's a smaller landlord. The other thing that you run into is market conditions. Like right now, interest rates are super low. And you could have kind of a not great place and people are still going to rent it for above market value just because of the way things are. So I think there's a lot of different things, but I think if this program has a future, I think it has to be with the existing nonprofit housing providers to do that. I just think
Mhm.
it's a really difficult, it's a little bit of oil and water when you start talking about the private, smaller landlords and government funds and all the strings tied to that.
Well, and that has affected the people that I serve because in the last 2 months, there's been 6 individual group homes that the person decided to no longer lead a group home and to sell their home and go into retirement because they can sell their home. So now I've had to help over 24 individuals
Wow.
try to find a new home. And
Wow.
and they don't fit the criteria, of, they need the caregiver, they need all
Mhm.
that type of stuff, which doesn't fit a lot of models.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you for sharing that, Bob. Yeah. That's...
Yeah.
By the way, we were thinking you'd be a great fit on the Affordable Housing Committee. So
Yeah.
I thought it was the RFP committee. Wait a
you said
minute.
not the RFP.
All right.
Yeah, I think group homes have really gotten hit because a lot of people just not paid rent, and it's been really hard for the people who have large numbers of apartments that they're dealing with or a large number of residents that they're dealing with
Yeah,
to manage
It's
that.
true.
I've heard other stories on that regard too.
Yeah, that's another issue.
Well, I want to be cognizant of time. I'm assuming there's no additional update from the RFP committee since we had the action. And
We could revisit it if you want.
no, that's okay. We only have 4 minutes. But
I thought there were
as
two
for
motions, though.
announcements, I would just like to point out that the city council is having one of their study sessions tomorrow. It's a follow-up to the previous one that was looking at CHHS and COC and asking some questions about that. It's going to be live streamed on Facebook and on the City Cable 5 Live that you can get to from the City of Spokane site. We are invited as CHHS board members, but have to be very careful about quorum. I don't know if Jerry's going to be able to attend, but I know Ann and I are going to be able to attend. So if you're interested in attending.
And Barry, you're attending.
What?
I think Barry's attending. Oh, you're not?
So if you're interested in attending, or as opposed to just watching, please let me know and we can make sure that you get the link, but also make sure that we have the right numbers so that we're not violating our quorum.
What's the time for that, Arlene?
It's at 11 a.m.
11.
And it's our joint discussion is only the first 45 minutes of that, so it won't be the full study session. And I don't really, that's sort of the extent of the agenda is joint discussion with CHHS and COC. So I'm not sure beyond that what the discussion is going to be, except for they wanted to follow up from the earlier study session. Any other announcements for the good of the board? Okay, well, then can we get a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Thanks, Catherine.
A second.
Thanks, Bob. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
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 Thanks everyone for a great discussion.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
I'm assuming there's nobody opposing or abstaining. Okay, well, thank you all so much. This was a great meeting, and I'm glad that you were here and it got a flavor of some of the important and tough things that we get to wrestle with on the board. So thank you so much. And I'll be reaching out to those of you who reached out to me in the chat about talking about other positions with the board. So thanks so much. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Aye.